This is the Fitness Wisdom Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Wisdom Podcast. Did you know the water inside of your body is nothing like the water that you drink? This is what we're going to be talking about today with my expert guest, who is an expert in circadian and quantum biology, Carrie Bennett. And we cannot talk about the fascinating nature of water without bringing light and magnetism into the discussion. Together they make the holy trinity for creating life, the three-legged stool for thriving organism. We'll be covering how all of these incredible forces are intertwined and influence the water and energy inside our body. So welcome, Carrie. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Andreas. I've been excited about this conversation.
Awesome. It's an honor to have you here. And I know that you're very, very passionate about the topic of water, and rightfully so, because it plays so many critical processes inside our body. But since I just mentioned as well on the introduction, we cannot talk about water without talking about light and magnetism. So how about we start off by laying the foundation for the audience? So let's go over the importance of light, water, and magnetism in human biology in general. Just give a basic, simple overview. You don't need to go too deep.
Sure. You know, the body is actually, what a body is trying to do, or any living creature is trying to do, is it's trying to get the correct energy and information it needs to survive. And if it can survive, then the next ideal situation is it can reproduce and procreate, right? That is really the name of the game. And then if we consider the body as like trying to always gather energy and information, we have to ask ourselves, well, what energy and what information, where does that come from? And so that's where you turn to light. Light is like what we would call a circadian signal. Creatures have evolved with varying light-dark conditions, you know, all throughout evolution, but also just in general throughout the course of a day, throughout the course of a season. You have differences in the light, and those changes in the light are signals. They tell the body information. You know, hormone secretion changes, growth and repair changes depending on the signals. Various organ systems will activate and become more participatory and also then take time to rest and recover depending on those signals. And so I started to get into this because I realized through my fitness career, basically, that I was never giving my body the correct information from light, because all I was doing was going from an artificially lit house at 5 o'clock in the morning to an artificially lit gym all day long, back to an artificially lit house. And it led to a lot of debilitating symptoms. And when I started to recognize that the information was chaotic, so that's why my body was behaving chaotically, it made perfect sense. And so that's how I started to kind of get into light and understanding light as information. And then the bridge here is that how can light be energy? Well, again, I think, you know, in my fitness training, I also went on to get a master's degree in clinical nutrition. And so I thought to myself, well, food must be the only way that we get energy. And it turns out that that is not even close to the full equation when it comes to how we can gather energy. And so part of this conversation, I think that we're going to have involve how water is an integral player in all of this, and how light absolutely interacts with that water for both energy and information purposes.
Oh, that's fascinating. And I've heard you say before that light is a nutrient, right? So could you break that down for us a little? What do you mean by that?
Certainly. So light, again, as a nutritionist, I was told to tell my clients to eat the rainbow, right? Because each color of, let's say, vegetable or fruit contained a different type of nutrient blend. And all of those nutrient blends would provide the body potentially with all of the nutrition and phytonutrients it needs. Now, instead of looking at it through the color of the produce, I look at light through the colors or the wavelengths that are being emitted. And sunlight, we've all seen it split through a prism or a rainbow. It contains all of the colors, right? All colors in full spectrum amounts, and then colors we can't even see, such as infrared and ultraviolet. And so I have come to recognize that those wavelengths are all interacting with our bodies in unique ways to provide some form of either energy or information. So for example, the ultraviolet can both provide energy for the body, but it can also stimulate a lot of different biochemical pathways if it's applied correctly. And so that's how I view light as a nutrient, because of all of the different things each wavelength range or each color can do to support our health.
Light influences every single system of your body, from mood, skin health, cognition, energy levels, gut health, sexual function, training performance, recovery, wound healing, body composition, and so much more. This is why I make sure to block the harmful artificial blue light and expose myself to the beneficial wavelengths of light to optimize my biology. Upgrade your biology today by upgrading your light environment. Head over to emrtech.com/mobilityfitness and use the promo code mobilityfitness for a massive 20% discount at checkout for the best red light therapy panels on the market and the best blue light blocking glasses.
Yeah, so it's not only important to block the artificial blue light after sunset, but it's critically important to be exposed to the full spectrum light, by being, exposed outdoors, because if we're sitting behind glass, we can maybe go into that a little bit later on in the podcast, we're distorting the type of light that we're receiving, especially modern glass these days is not allowing the full spectrum of light to enter our houses. And many individuals do not necessarily either make an effort to go outside or they don't have the time to go outside. So we need to find little hacks and ways that maybe we can give people, along the way in this podcast, that they can introduce light into their life, because as you just mentioned, it plays so many critical roles in our biology, from hormones, metabolism, cell repair, regeneration, detox. Basically, it governs the entire system before the biochemical reactions, right? So this is like the governing force of the biochemistry inside our body. So maybe you can tell us, how is the water inside our body different from the water that we drink?
Sure. Though, hearing that the body, I'm certain you've heard this too, right? Back in the day, I was taught that the human body is about 70% water. And my general assumption was that it was in that liquid state of water that we see in a glass of water. And it was just there, but it wasn't participatory in any way. It didn't play any, unique role in our health. And when I came around, just stagnant, like we need the blood to flow, obviously, but inside of the cells, it was almost like the cell was a swimming pool, and that the more important molecules and organelles and proteins could swim through, this pool of water, and the water was just there, almost like a cushioning effect. And it turns out, as I was, diving deeper and deeper into the research on light, I came across the research on water, and that was mainly through the lens of Gerald Pollack, who I'm certain you've alluded to before, but we could talk about his work. And then also Mae-Wan Ho, who's a less well-known physicist, but equally brilliant human being, who was talking about how the water in our bodies was in a liquid crystalline or structured state. And in fact, that water inside of us took on more of a gel-like consistency. And so that had me hooked. It's like, okay, wait a second. The water is a gel-like consistency and it's structured. And when apparently it structures itself, as I was learning, and when it structures itself into this gelled texture or gelled consistency, that gives the water unique properties. Essentially, it becomes a new phase or type of water that behaves very differently than just liquid water in a glass. And I learned that actually water in that liquid crystalline state can absorb energy. It can absorb information. It can transmit it, transmute it, amplify it. And so that water then became an integral part of what's happening in the cells and an integral part of what's happening in the human body in general. And so to have it being forgotten as almost like a byproduct or non-participatory, to me, that was shocking as I started to learn this. And that's when I really decided that I wanted to teach more about this, especially publicly or socially on social media, because I think people need to realize if we can view how the body operates through the lens of water and that true hydration, you can literally improve health in such simple ways that are often overlooked.
So what you're saying is that the water that we drink doesn't necessarily hydrate us. What do you think actually happens to the water that we drink? What's the mechanism of the why do we actually need to drink water in the first place?
Well, it can maintain our blood volume, right? That's an absolutely essential signal. So there's different ways that we get hydration, and drinking water can absolutely be important. That depends on the type of water that we're drinking, the quality of that water, because when the blood has adequate hydration, some of that hydration, if it has extra, will leak out of the capillaries and it'll bathe the space between the cells, and some of it can actually get into the cell and become cellular water. But the vast majority of the water inside of the cell is actually produced in the cell by our mitochondria. And so it's a forgotten source of hydration. And as you know, mitochondria also require light. They need appropriate light frequencies in order to make that water in the first place. And modern living has really divorced us from a lot of the key wavelengths of light that we are reliant on to optimize hydration through mitochondrial water production. So, water we drink can be important, but to focus solely on that, it's why clients were coming to me telling me they were drinking, 2 liters, 2.5 liters of water a day, and were
Yeah.
peeing all the time, still had headaches, high blood pressure, And so I started to
Yeah.
realize that there was so much more to being truly hydrated than just drinking
Yeah.
enough water.
Yeah, I can tell you a bit of a story. I used to, in the past, when I started my body transformation, let's say when I was 14 years old, I was an overweight child. And that's the reason why I got into fitness in the first place. And basically, I was reading some bodybuilding articles about how to lose fat fast, right? And some of the recommendations were that these bodybuilders were drinking 6 liters of water per day because apparently it helps speed up fat loss. And anyway, I didn't read into the research or anything. So I just followed this guidance, and I just noticed that, oh my God, first of all, I was running to the bathroom all the time, right? So every 20 minutes I was going to pee. But then I also felt really, really fainty because, now that I understand, I was completely depleting my minerals. And here the water in Cyprus as well is very, very high in calcium. It's very hard. So I can't imagine what was actually going on inside of my body. I must have been totally wrecking my body back then. But thankfully, I was super young. So, once I stopped all of those silly behaviors, I feel like my body would have the chance to spring back. But I can't imagine doing those type of behaviors right now. But yeah, like as you were saying, the more water that I drank, and the more I got used to drinking so many liters of water, the more thirsty I was. I felt like my tongue was super, super dry. But then now that I drink less water than ever, I feel like my tongue is never dry, which is super weird because I spend more time outdoors. I'm connected to nature. I have healthy circadian rhythms, which all of these kind of habits contribute to the hydration of our body. We will definitely get into that into this conversation. But yeah, I think that it's so important for people to understand that the water that you drink is not sufficient to hydrate your body on a cellular level. But as Carrie is saying, that it's critical, for our blood volume and maintaining some basic biological processes. The way I thought about it was, since I started learning about this gel-like water, this exclusion type of water, I thought to myself, the only reason we drink water is just so our esophagus and our tongue doesn't dry out. But then we make the rest of the water, on a cellular level. Would you agree with that? For example, when you think about breatharians, people who don't maybe eat or drink anything, do you think that that's how their body is thriving through this cellular water?
Yeah, I absolutely do. There's a whole ether conversation too, how we can essentially convert subtle energy into nourishment, that I think that happens with breatharianism. But I do believe that the ability of our mitochondria to make water really truly
Uh-huh.
dictates how much water we need to drink. So I know
Right.
of researchers, I'm certain you do too, who don't drink water. They drink olive oil because they've coached their mitochondria into becoming very efficient at taking the hydrogen, which has electrons and protons, from the olive
Yeah.
oil and converting that into water in the mitochondria. So I think
Uh-huh.
mitochondrial health and mitochondrial water production is absolutely essential. And you can be
Mm,
hydrated solely
mm,
through addressing mitochondrial hydration, as opposed to you can
mm.
drink a ton of water, but if your mitochondria are not operational, that's never going to fully hydrate your cells.
Maybe now it would be a good spot to talk about the things that actually dehydrate our body and actually cause cellular dehydration, because I feel like it's an appropriate part of the conversation to talk about it. So what type of things are causing people to become dehydrated beyond not drinking sufficient and high quality water?
Sure. Modern living has introduced a lot of things that I think can either harm the mitochondria or act as a dehydrating agent to the body in general. One of the things that crosses both of those pathways is non-native electromagnetic fields, so wireless radiation, basically. And the analogy that I heard and I've loved is about cooking meat, a steak in a microwave, right? A microwave is
Mm,
full of this wireless radiation, and in
yeah.
order for the microwave to actually heat up that food, the radiation is being absorbed by the water and vibrating the water molecules. And in doing so, it literally dehydrates the meat. It heats it
Mm,
up, but it dehydrates it. And so
yeah.
we now, unfortunately, are being bathed in, I wouldn't even know the number, quadrillions, right? Quadrillions of waves of non-native electromagnetic fields that have only been around for, about 100 years and are growing exponentially. And
Yeah.
so in that exponential growth, we've reached a critical point, I believe, that we are chronically unintentionally dehydrated because our bodies are absorbing that microwave radiation and it's diminishing our ability to stay hydrated. Dr. Pollack's lab did some interesting research in which they showed that that gelled water inside of our cells that is so critical for optimum cellular health, it was unable to form adequately in the presence of Wi-Fi radiation. And then additionally, that wireless radiation harms the mitochondria. And if you're harming the mitochondria, they then are not able to build or produce that water for us. So you've got like a double whammy situation where we have something that's draining our water inside of our cells, essentially, but also preventing the mitochondria from adequately replenishing it. So we are in this state of chronic unintended dehydration that then I think because that water plays such critical roles in cellular health, that ultimately leads to cellular dysfunction, so much of the disease states that we're seeing. In addition to that wireless radiation, you also have glyphosate, Roundup, right? That's a pervasive pesticide, and it too prevents the water inside of our cells from forming that beautiful exclusion zone or gelled water completely, and it harms the mitochondria.
How do you think that it does that? What's the mechanism?
Do you know what I think what just happens is in the presence of contaminants like that, the structure gets broken or it can't even form. Essentially, as soon as it forms, my thought is that you have something that's so capable of diminishing the bonding, right? Something that can essentially break the bonds of the structure itself. And that, so it's almost like building a house and then having a wrecking ball always there. It's like you're building a wall, wrecking it down. It also likely diminishes I have a feeling it diminishes the charge of things like the membranes and the places where that gelled water forms because you've got these hydrophilic charged surfaces. So I have a feeling it also is diminishing the charge in some capacity so that this gelled water can't form and structure itself completely. But if anyone's interested, Jerry's lab did write a lovely article about the things that he studied that would help the body to make this gelled water and the things that destroyed it. And so interestingly, the things that were destructive, the wireless radiation, the glyphosate, anesthesia, which is very much a fluoride based. The vast majority of anesthesia these days is fluoride based. So it's interesting to see that some of the most pervasive chemicals and exposures are things that either diminish the production of water by the mitochondria or literally prevent the exclusion zones from forming to their full capacity in the first place.
Yeah, that's super fascinating because it makes you realize that, wow, it's not sufficient that I live a good lifestyle, but I have to avoid certain things in my life as well. This is what people need to understand, that many times, in this modern day and age, we reach out for the biohacks or the modern tools, right? And we think that those are going to solve all our problems when in reality, it's like, no, we need to remove the stressors and the harms in the first place. So we do not need to use the biohacks in the first place. But if we do utilize them, it's more for optimization, more for thriving. And they obviously all have their time and place. And obviously for individuals who are struggling with their health, they're obviously going to see tremendous benefit from using those hacks and tools. It's just more ideal if you can eliminate the source of the problem in the first place. So you're not just patching the problem and trying to live your life. And then further down the line, you have to keep on investing in more and more biohacks, supplements, different kind of tools so you can fix your health. But to be able to address your health, you have to go to the source of what Carrie was talking about this electromagnetic radiation, the pollutants. And also I can imagine that the blue light as well is impacting the mitochondria as well, right? Do you want to talk about the electron transport chain and how blue light impacts the electron transport chain? Artificial
Certainly.
blue light.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So the electron transport chain is this pathway inside of the mitochondria. And so mitochondria are little organelles that live in our cells. We've got thousands of them, if not hundreds of thousands, depending on the cell type. And they've got two membranes. They've got an outer membrane and an inner membrane. And in that inner membrane is where the electron transport chain lies. And those are what would be called different proteins of this electron transport chain. And the job of these proteins is essentially to take electrons and pass them from one step to the other to the other. So you've got 4 steps of passing those electrons. And the 4th step, when that electron gets passed through that 4th step, water is produced. As these electrons are being passed from step to step, then you also have what are called protons building up in the space between the outer and the inner membrane, almost like a balloon inflating. You build up this pressure gradient of protons, this positive charge, and those protons are seeking a way out to an area of lower pressure. And their way out is typically through what's called step 5 of the electron transport chain, the ATPase. And that's where ATP is made. So step 4, you make water. Step 5, you make ATP. You're also making infrared as well and carbon dioxide. And so you've got this process happening. I think ATP has become this star when in fact ATP is a player, but water production is absolutely essential, knowing that I know now about that water cellular energy. And
Mm,
what research is finding is that artificial blue light is preferentially absorbed by that step 4. There's a lot of what are called chromophores, if you will. There's a lot of ways in which that blue light is being absorbed. And unfortunately, blue light inhibits water production in the mitochondria, artificial blue light, right? So you're literally
mhm,
blocking step 4 from that artificial blue light. I think the way that reason that was built into nature is because when blue light was dominant in nature, you also had massive amounts of infrared light, which would keep that water. That infrared light is what helps to keep that water inside of our cells hydrated, fully
mm,
charged is what we would call it, right? That's a
mm,
battery of energy that needs that infrared. And so it would make sense that yes, we wouldn't need to necessarily worry about electron flow through the mitochondria when we had access to this other really dominant energy wavelength that we could use to charge our water batteries. But
mm.
unfortunately, these days, modern lighting is dominant in the blue, really, really high in that blue, while literally missing all of the red, near infrared, and far infrared that the mitochondria
Mm.
also need to be healthy. And even modern window glass. I mean, just recently, I just like to remind myself, I took my spectrometer, which is a device that measures the color blend of light. And it was like, window closed, window open. Like, what's the difference? And that closed
Yeah.
window blocks literally a ton of red, near infrared, and far infrared light. I mean, almost all of the
Mm,
far is so
mm,
it's really detrimental now that we have these energy efficient windows and energy efficient lighting that's maybe good for the building, but for human bodies, we're literally divorced from true sources of energy that provide our body with actual cellular charge. And so, that's why I think, like you were saying before, be aware of what's negatively impacting. And then instead
mm,
of jumping straight to the biohacks, slowly start to mitigate what's negatively impacting it and then go to nature. Nature becomes that much more of a tool for you
mm.
when you realize, okay, when I stop being bathed in this artificial blue light, when I stop always, having my windows closed, when I stop consuming glyphosate to the best of my ability, when I stop wearing wireless devices on my body or have smart technology just bathing my home, when I stop
Mhm.
doing that, then earthing and getting sunlight on the skin and being outside at key times of the day, all of those things actually add up to really optimize health.
So maybe we can get into the power of grounding. How is that influencing the water inside our body? Of course, it's a very powerful way to harvest energy from the earth, but what is the mechanism by which it helps to maybe make the water more coherent or structured?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, in order to understand that, let's go back to that water a little bit more.
Okay.
So, what Dr. Pollack's lab found is that water, one of the other differences between that water, beyond just the texture, the consistency, was that
Mhm,
water, what the intracellular gelled water, is negatively charged. Unlike
mhm,
in a glass, liquid water in a glass, it's neutral. So, essentially, the
mhm,
electrons and protons cancel each other out, whereas somehow the gelled water is negatively charged. And he found that it was critical to maintain that negative charge. And as that negative charge drained, cells started to become dysfunctional to the extent that they could start to divide uncontrollably and become cancerous. And so
mm,
clearly, maintaining that charge was vital to cellular health, and that charge was negative. So then, his research was started to dive into, and then also I think just we can connect the dots with all the health benefits that we've seen from earthing research, was that we now know that what he showed was that when non-structured water, specifically that water that could build exclusion zones or this negative charge, when it was exposed to an additional negatively charged substance or earthing, or you can get negatively charged structured water, it
mhm.
actually caused the water that wasn't in an exclusion zone to become an exclusion zone water, basically.
Hmm.
As we
Wow.
as we charge, so let's say from the Earth's surface has a ton of negative charge flowing from it.
Hmm.
As we touch that with bare skin and it flows into us, that current flow is helping to essentially replenish where exclusion zone water is depleted. And one of the coolest ways that we can see this in real time is to look at blood. It's called a live blood analysis, where you take a drop of
Mm.
blood, you put it under a microscope, and red blood cells are designed to have exclusion zone water around them. It's this halo of negative
Mm.
charge that's been called theta potential. I'm certain
Mm.
you've seen the images where those red blood
Yeah.
cells are stacked on top of each other like pancakes or like
Yeah.
poker chips. They literally have lost their negative charge, because if two things
Mm.
have a negative charge, like charges repel. And so they have lost that exclusion zone water, that charge around them. And so then you take these individuals and you give them a glass of negatively charged structured water, or you send them outside and you have them earth for 5 minutes and then come
Mm.
back and do another blood analysis. All of a sudden you don't see them stacked anymore. You see them literally as their independent little rafts that they're designed to be, plumped away from each other with that negative charge around them. And so it's this idea that if we can give the body charge, that's the currency that it's looking for. And yes, that
Mm.
charge can come from food. It absolutely can, but that's not the
Mm.
only place that we get that charge. The earth, sunlight, structured water, negatively charged water, even the negative ions that we get breathing in ocean air or air by a waterfall has been shown to enhance the structured water inside of our bodies. And so it was a game
Mm.
changer for me, and so much more enjoyable to coach clients as opposed to nitpicking their food and getting decent results. With clients, I started to say, wow, gather charge and let's see what happens
Mm.
there. And that's where the client results just, went off the charts in terms of the improvements that you'll see with health.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like when you give the body what it needs, it knows innately what to do. The body has this innate intelligence, sort of like a program, and it's just waiting for us every single day. Like every single new day is a new opportunity to give the body what it needs so it can start to heal, to repair, to regenerate, and to detoxify. And since we start to lose our mitochondrial capacity as we age, obviously that process begins to slow down. But if we do everything right, we can spring back, better than ever. And we can even start reversing our biological age, which I think is absolutely incredible, because that just shows us that age is simply a number, but it's more about your habits, behaviors, and acts that you do like every single day. Because all of those things that, like you mentioned, they all stack on top of each other. And it's all about how many health promoting habits do you have in the day versus health stealing habits, and if you're doing less of those and more of the good stuff, then of course you're going to be gathering more of that charge. But I feel like so many people are caught up in, eating the right type of food and exercising and, maybe sleeping enough, but they're totally missing out on getting enough sunlight or, blocking the blue light at night, minimizing the radiation from phones, Wi-Fi's, cell towers, all this stuff, and connecting with the earth on a daily basis. I mean, I don't know many individuals who put their bare feet on the ground, apart from the Circadian and quantum health, community, whether that is in grass or the sea, which is I love. I go every single morning to the sea, and that's my favorite. And I feel very blessed and fortunate to be able to do that, because I live right by the sea. And if I don't go there in the morning, I feel anxious for the rest of the day. And it's not a mental thing. It's a very physiological reaction. I feel my heartbeat is more rapid. I feel more uptight in my fascial tissues. I feel like I get more stress throughout the day. And all of these things just simply because I didn't go and get grounded. Plus, I'm getting sunlight at the same time since I'm outside. So the beautiful thing about connecting with nature is that you are simply, you can get all of the things at the same time. You can get the grounding, you can get the magnetism, you can get the electrons, you can get the solar radiation, and all of that is attuning us to the rhythm of the earth, which is what we are designed to be tuned to. And when we become untuned or incoherent with nature, that's when disease seems to manifest in the body, right? So the further away that we are from nature, and this is basically what you're saying, is that all of the things that actually promote that exclusion zone water, that gel-like water inside the body that has so many incredible and protective properties against, health conditions and health promoting things as well. It's built by our connection with nature. But of course, we know that as well, that red light, which is also found in sunlight, is incredible for building. And that you said the red and the infrared is incredible for building that exclusion zone water. Maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about the importance of sunlight on the exclusion zone water and how that actually influences it. Because I've seen you before on your Instagram say that the body is a battery made out of water charged by sunlight. And I absolutely love that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I got Jerry Pollack's stamp of approval on that too about a year ago. So that was fun. So what that means is that, and again, I love to give credit where credit is due, right? This is just me taking other brilliant research and trying to put make it clinically useful. And so the research here was done by Dr. Pollack's lab yet again. And what his lab showed was that whenever water encountered a biological surface, yes, an exclusion zone formed. But if you were to apply infrared, specifically far infrared light or heat, if you will, those are very synonymous. We can't see them, remember? And I know you know that, but I think it's hard for people to realize that something can be heat and light at the same time. And that's what we're talking about here, this far infrared. That when that was applied to the exclusion zone in a lab setting, it expanded fourfold. It essentially created more exclusion zone water. And as it did that, that's more charge. And they found that charge actually did translate into more cellular energy or potential cellular energy. So then as a clinician, that means that my brain is like, what are all the sources of infrared? If this exclusion zone water, this negatively charged water is essential for health, and you can apply infrared to charge it and expand it. And infrared is lacking these days in the vast majority of people, our exposure to it. What can we do? And so that is where sunlight comes into play, because sunlight always contains at least 40% of its spectrum in the infrared portion. So I would apply my clients out into the sun. And if it was the winter, I thought to myself, well, I'm in a winter climate. So what would people have traditionally been exposed to? Well, they traditionally would have been exposed to fire, right? Fire would have been a source. And then, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, which I'm certain you're aware of, you see sauna or sauna. I might be mispronouncing that that's been such a health promoting tool for, I don't know, hundreds of years, for a very long time at least. And there's so much beautiful long-term research that's being done on how having frequent sauna use is such a promoter in terms of reducing all-cause mortality by 40%, cardiovascular mortality by 50%, depending on the populations that you're studying. And so to me, the dot connector here is if we're applying infrared is keeping this cellular energy completely repleted, all full, it's fully charged. That means then that's going to allow the cell to do all of its tasks. A cell that can do all of its tasks can run everything beautifully and be essentially optimized to health. So those are the sources of infrared that I typically have clients most utilize. I have them utilize sunlight. I have them utilize sauna. I also have them utilize hot baths. I have seen tremendous benefits from hot baths.
Really?
Especially, yes, absolutely. Especially if you filter the water and you then can use the water as a carrier of things like minerals. And so I love mineral-rich baths for people. Exactly. Magnesium. I've had clients benefit from Epsom salts. I've had clients benefit from just the Dead Sea minerals themselves being added to the water, adding in even baking soda to the water. There's a lot of the ways that you can transform your water. And so, I think the combination there is, yes, we need the minerals because minerals help us hold the water. The other thing about holding on to exclusion zone water is we need adequate mineral status inside of our cells, around our cells. And these days, our food is mineral deficient. Our soil is mineral depleted. And so if you can then add in sources of minerals in conjunction with the infrared, I find it to be just a beautiful synergistic combination.
Do you think that unrefined sea salt is an adequate source of getting complete minerals, or do you feel like, because I like to use shilajit on a daily basis, which is this herbal mineral substance, I'm sure you've heard of it before, because it's so much more dense, it's this decomposition of plants and bacteria taking a process over thousands of years. So it's basically such a condensed form of plant matter, basically, and dirt. But, humans have somehow figured out that it's something good for us. And, it just also gives us the humic and the fulvic acid, which is allowing the transportation of those minerals to get into the cell, which is pretty awesome compared to just taking electrolytes by themselves. So do you think that just adding unrefined sea salt is sufficient to get like the full spectrum of minerals that we actually
If there was one substance that could increase your energy levels, optimize mitochondrial function, boost ATP production, help to optimize your hormones, remineralize the body with ionic minerals, boost cognitive function, assist detoxification, and support your gut health via the microbiome, this substance is Shilajit, known as the destroyer of weakness. Shilajit is a herbal mineral substance made from the decomposition of plants and bacteria, this process taking place over thousands of years. It is harvested from high altitude locations, primarily the Altai and Himalayan mountains. And what makes Shilajit so unique is that it's made by Mother Nature herself. I call it nature's methylene blue. Not all Shilajit that you find on the market is created equally. This is why I only use and trust Mountain Drop Shilajit. They have an extremely high quality Shilajit product that has been rigorously tested for heavy metals and impurities. Grab yourself some Shilajit, the destroyer of weakness, today and head over to mountaindrop.com. Use the promo code MobilityFitness at checkout for a nice discount as well.
Now that I remembered about the temperature, how does cold contribute to the water inside our body? Do you think that that actually influences the exclusion zone water?
Designed when it's cold outside, we're designed to make heat in two different ways. One of them is through shivering our muscles, which is very inefficient and very energetically consuming, like energetically taxing. The other way, though, that we're really supposed to is our mitochondria in certain parts of our body are designed to make heat for us. And they do that because they've got this little protein in their inner membrane called uncoupling protein, almost viewed as like a little channel. And that channel typically remains mostly closed. But in response to cold, it opens wide. And when it opens wide, all the protons that are kind of that pressure gradient that was built up in that inner membrane space, those protons flood back inside of the interior of the mitochondria. And the flow of protons generates heat. And so that's how we're designed to heat up. And guess what? That flow of protons generates that infrared heat. That infrared heat is absorbed by the water inside of the cell, and it expands the exclusion zone. And so, yes, our mitochondria and their ability to generate that heat for us in response to cold can definitely play a role in terms of establishing exclusion zone water. Now, there's a little bit of nuance to that because not everyone's mitochondria are able to do that in the same way. If someone's mitochondria evolved more towards the equator, they wouldn't have been exposed to the same seasonal winter that people who lived farther from the equator did. And so the farther away from the equator your mitochondria essentially have evolved from, and they're all passed down along the maternal lineage, the more likely your mitochondria can do that in response to cold. Whereas I have seen individuals who have what's called an L, which is mitochondria that are straight literally from the equator, in response to cold, they utilize cold for the other benefits, the resilience boosting, the norepinephrine production, the dopamine regulating effects. So they use it for different reasons, but they're not people who could be in a cold plunge for a long period of time and then have their body heat up for them. They have to be aware that if they kind of reach past that limit, that threshold, the only way they have to warm up is to shiver, or of course these days, modern days, we could take a hot shower or something like that. And so, but
or
yes,
a
it
sauna.
absolutely. Or a sauna, yeah, exactly. So these days, right? So I mean, I would say these days, people are not cold adapted. They're not using cold. We live in thermoneutral conditions. And so for so many people, our mitochondria, in the same way as like if you don't exercise, your muscles start to atrophy and you're not going to be as strong or be able to be as functional or as athletic. That happens in our mitochondria. These specific mitochondria, when they live in thermoneutral conditions, this process essentially downregulates to the extent where it goes away. And people have to start coaching it back into them. And that can easily be done. That's a slow kind of coaching process of cold exposure. But when you do that, you'll notice the benefits of the cold, and it will be building that exclusion zone water.
Wow, it's super fascinating because, again, like we mentioned previously, nature has it all so perfect, like the perfect recipe, right? So if you get in a cold sea in the wintertime, you're getting grounded and you're getting the minerals, transdermal, and you're getting, the cold exposure. If you stay in long enough, you're getting, the sinking to the earth circadian rhythm as well. Because I feel like, doesn't the earth's magnetic field also sync our circadian rhythm as well, not just the type of light that we're exposed to, but I feel that when I'm more connected with the earth, like grounded more throughout the day, beyond 30 minutes, I feel this tremendous connection with the earth's rhythm in a way that I feel so tired at night compared to not grounding, even if I get the natural light throughout the day. You know what I mean? Do you think that has...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it does. What we now know is that the flow of electrons it has its own 24-hour rhythm. in your local environment, in my local environment. So essentially, based on the charge that we can get from the earth, that's a secondary syncing of the time of day. It's called the Carnegie curve, and it shifts and changes.
Cool.
And so, yeah, so absolutely. The other thing too that I think goes back to when you were talking about how you would feel more anxious, or your blood pressure, or your heart rate would rise when you don't get earthed and grounded. Part of that is that when we earth and ground, essentially, well, put it this way, essentially, we're like, our water acts as an antenna as well, right? A frequency antenna. And so I'll have to come back and talk all about, our frequency antenna. But in its liquid crystalline state, it absorbs information. And some of that information is chaotic. It's noise. So picture the information, picture all, like, just like I could pull out a radio right now and turn it on and start twisting the dial and pull in any radio station that's around me. Those waves are being absorbed by the water in my body as well. And in order for me to essentially discharge that noise that gets built up, I have to earth. In the same way that a radio station wants to strengthen their signal connection, they've got to ground their antenna, and they'll pick it up and they'll project their signal. When we earth and we ground, we discharge the noise and we tune more strongly into our main signals, which is the Schumann resonance and its harmonics. And the Schumann resonance is about 8 hertz, and the next one up is about 14 hertz. Those two things are tied to our brainwave states, being both in kind of like that we're designed to be calm and creative. That's the 8 hertz alpha range. And then the next level up, the 14-ish or so hertz, that's low beta. So we can be logical, but we can be creative, calm, and logical at the same time. Unfortunately, the waves that are surrounding us these days are really high frequency waves, and those are putting us into high beta. High beta brain states are associated with hyper arousal, more anxiety, just a feeling of more nervous system dysregulation. And so earthing and grounding also helps just to sync up our brainwave states so we can be in that calm, creative mode.
Wow. So since the frequency that we're exposed to, the Earth's frequencies also alters the water inside of our body, what other things like just sound healing, for example, influence the water inside our body?
It does. And in fact, there was collaborative research that was done between the researcher who is studying cymatics, John Stewart Reed, and Gerald Pollack. And the research that they did, John basically is studying sound, the effect of sound on water. And what they found was that sound, yes, he knows that sound imprints into water because it can create what are called standing waves or geometrical patterns in the water. Essentially, the water inside of us can absorb that as information. But they also found that sound applications can build exclusion zones, because when sound transmits, it transmits through a actual physical, like, for example, the air molecules. The air is going to pass it through vibrations, and in our bodies, the water passes it through vibrations, and they're called inelastic collisions. And these collisions produce infrared. So sound essentially can also produce infrared and maintain exclusions of water. Yeah, it's so cool.
Wow, that is really incredible. And what came to my mind just now when you said about the vibration, I just thought about movement, and I thought about massage guns and all of this kind of stuff, because I love to use a vibration ball at night and a massage gun to work my main big 6 lymphatic areas from Dr. Perry Nicholson. And I do those every single evening before bed. And I've noticed a tremendous difference, because I've had experiences in the past where my lymph nodes have been so swollen that it's been really, really uncomfortable, especially during maybe underneath the armpits, or maybe in areas like on my belly, just at the base of the ribs. And I've just been wondering, like, why on earth is it like swollen here? It just doesn't feel right, And then I just started researching more and more about lymphatics, the importance of detoxification and, the lymphatic system, and moving the fluids, around the body efficiently and detoxifying the body. And, as soon as I started using you don't need to use a vibration ball or a massage gun, but I like to use those for speed and convenience. And I just do that every day, and it's just truly incredible. So maybe you can tell us how the vibration from the balls, or you just kind of mentioned that already, that it produces heat, but then what about movement? How is movement influencing our fascia and our water?
Sure. So another aspect of charge production, negative charge, is the fact that our fascia can generate its own charge. It's called piezoelectricity. So negative charge through movement, through compression.
I love that word.
Force. Yeah, I love it too. And so now we know that I also think I've got kind of an out of the box thought on why being sedentary is so harmful to health. And I think we're designed to be moving living creatures. And when we move, we generate piezoelectricity in the same way that electron flow from the earth can maintain exclusion zone water. I think movement can also maintain exclusion zone water and negative charge. And so being sedentary, again, we're essentially cutting ourselves off from another way to sustain our charged bodies and our charged water. And so I believe that's what's happening with the movement, is it's actually generating that electrical current. And we also know that the flow of energy maintains what's called coherence, which is another topic, but that's just organization. Basically, a body that's running billions upon billions upon billions of tasks needs to have an organizational flow to it. And when you flow, when you have electron flow or charge flow, that's one way to maintain that coherence.
And do you believe that the exclusion zone water and the fascia are intertwined, like they are kind of sort of like one system? Do they feed into each other?
They do. Now, exclusion zone water can compartmentalize itself, right? And so, but I believe the exclusion zone water around the fascia is actually critical. We know that dehydrated fascia does not conduct charge, right? And so that's research has been done. But we also know that when the fascia, specifically collagen it forms these triple helices. And these triple helices, when the collagen forms a collagen bundle, it's essentially 6 triple helices around one central one. And in those collagen bundles, they have discovered what are called water nanotubes. So literally tubes of this liquid crystalline water that don't exist inside of its own vasculature. And these tubes have been shown to be able to funnel charge and energy and information faster than the speed of light. We're talking about literally the fact that that's one way that we maintain what I would call quantum level communication in the body. So the integrity of our collagen, the integrity of the hydration around the collagen, and its ability to form these helices and these bundles absolutely matters in terms of maintaining a body that is, again, fully able to funnel energy and information wherever it's needed.
So that since it's a body-wide network, the fascial system is wrapped around every single organ and system of the body, and then it's sort of intertwined. I think about it in a way like, that there is structure until there is no physical structure, if you know what I mean. It's sort of like hard on the periphery, and it sort of goes more like gel, like liquidy towards the center. And then this would make sense that the way that the body would be able to communicate in the form of lights and electromagnetism, at the speed of light, so because that's so much more faster compared to, biochemistry.
Yes. It's like
also it would make sense that helped. Yeah, exactly. So then that would make sense that the energy transfer too, the electrons can fly anywhere in the body where energy is actually required. If you have inflammation, or if you have muscle damage from training, or something just needs more energy, more charge. And what I've understood from this whole discussion today that we've been having so far is that the main theme or the main word is charge. So it's always coming back to that charge, right? Always building that voltage, or probably Jerry Tennant, that he wrote that book Healing is Voltage. And I just feel that there has to be this voltage in the cells, and then when that voltage drops down below a certain level, that's when disease begins to manifest in the body. And that's exactly what you're saying, how critically important the role of water has on this function in maintaining the charge and also transferring the charge and holding on to that charge for ourselves. So it's sort of like the middleman in a way in this energy production process for holding on to the stuff that the cell needs to give it to it when it actually needs it. Would you say that that's correctly phrased?
Yeah, absolutely. It's what I would call like a depot or a repository of charge, and it funnels the charge. And if you think about the fascia, most people think and I know you don't think this, but most people think that it just surrounds organs, but it literally goes into every single cell, right? It's able to be, it's finer and finer webbing. It's the extracellular matrix. It penetrates into the cell and becomes the cytoskeleton. It penetrates into the nucleus and becomes the nuclear matrix. And so it literally can. Wow. There's not one space that's untouched by it. So that is how we're able to funnel the charge and the energy and the information literally wherever it's needed to transform cellular health.
And we talked about previously about, the detrimental effects of sitting and not moving so much. And, I work with a lot of people who are trying to improve their mobility and their flexibility, or improve their ability to move their body in general and be pain-free. And many, many times, no matter how many mobility drills we do or strength training we do, I just find that it's very, very hard for them, for their fascial system or the water networks in their body to get more elastic / more pliable. So of course, if we address the nervous system issue, which could be influencing the fascial system, that is a huge factor. So by showing safety to the nervous system, we can massively influence the way that our tissues, whether they are tight or they're not tight, and then that's going to influence the fascial system. But if we have addressed that and we still have issues, with our mobility or restriction in our movement, I feel that what you just mentioned in terms of the body being more dehydrated or the water becoming more incoherent, now is actually, it can be resulting in us being more stiff, even if we're doing all the right things that we think that we're supposed to be doing to actually improve. Would you agree with that?
Oh,
The dynamic stretching routine is the ultimate program to help you eliminate stagnation and stiffness, helping you to restore fluidity and range of motion to your body. Some of the benefits you may notice by following this program: reduce stiffness and tightness from your body, improved blood flow, improved passive and active range of motion, which is your mobility, decrease your recovery time between workouts, improve your body awareness and control, and most importantly, to move better and more efficiently throughout life. This program is for anyone looking to move better, recover faster, and feel confident in their ability to move their body. Join the dynamic stretching routine program today, and let's get flowing.
100% that research has been done, and they showed that tissue stiffness is a sign of more of that liquid water, not the gelled water. And ultimately, the more you can get that water to be bound and structured, like the exclusion in its exclusion zone form, the tissue softens.
So where can people find you, connect with you, and work with you if they wish to reach out?
Sure. So, a hub of learning that I try to drip out content very consistently is Instagram. So you can find me at Carrie B Wellness on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel as well, Carrie B Wellness, or you can go to carriebwellness.com, where I offer trainings for practitioners in this type of stuff, as well as courses for individuals who are looking to utilize light and water and nature to heal themselves.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Carrie. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I would look forward to do it again in the future.
This is the Fitness Wisdom Podcast.